customer discovery by far. There's processes to ask the questions, have conversations with potential customers. I'd say that if folks spend more time just doing that process of learning their market, going through the iterations of having the conversations even before putting a website up, even before writing a line of code, there's some great resources out there that, I don't know, just like worksheets and canvases to fill out and all this kind of stuff. That's where I suggest to start. I think spend the time there, make it gel, and then move on to the really heavy lifting.
Hey everyone, this is Devin Miller here with another episode of The Inventive Expert. I'm your host, Devin Miller, the serial entrepreneur that's grown several startups into 7- and 8-figure businesses, as well as the founder and CEO of Miller IP Law, where we help startups and small businesses with their patents and trademarks. If you ever need help with yours, just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat. Now, today we have another great guest on the podcast, Kirk. I was going to say Cart, and I don't know why. Kirk Marple. Maybe that's because I got everything jumbled together. Kirk Marple. But hey, we're going to talk a lot about bootstrapping versus raising money. We're going to talk about the different paths to start a business, including the money side, growing a team, how to keep focused, some on the technology side, maybe a bit with capturing data, and otherwise how to applying insights to that, and to have a bit of a data-driven business. And so a lot of great things that we'll probably hit on and have a great conversation. So with that much as an introduction, welcome on the podcast, Kirk.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Great to be here again.
Absolutely. So now, before we dive into the topic at hand, maybe just take a couple minutes and introduce yourself a bit to the audience as to why you have experience in this area and why they should listen to what you have to say.
Well, no, I think it's, there's so much, thankfully having some gray hair now, I've learned a lot over the years and had multiple businesses, have a current business right now that just got venture funded this year. And it's been a ride. I think there's so much learning that you can get from the ups and downs, as well as, being on the technical side and being on the business side as well. So.
Awesome. Well, I definitely think it's a great area to have experience in, an area where a lot of people are going to want and look forward to that expertise. So with that much as a great introduction, let's dive into some of the topics at hand. So one of the ones that I think that almost all startups or small businesses often face, or they all face, is, how are we going to pay for this? I have a great idea. Maybe I want to start a business and I have the desire to do so. Now you got to figure out, how to pay for it, or how to get it started, or how to do it without having a lot of money. And so one of the questions that often comes up is, kind of bootstrapping versus raising money. For those of you maybe not as familiar, which you probably are, but bootstrapping is kind of where you do it yourself. You either put in your own time, money, and effort, but you don't take in any outside investor dollars or outside money, and you're just doing it as you're able to, or as you go, and you're funding it yourself. Raising money is obviously where you go to a third party. They can give it to you as debit or debt, or they can give it to you as investments, or they can give it to you for equity, and there are different ways to raise money. But how do you kind of start as you're getting going with the business, kind of determining bootstrapping versus raising money, or what path to take?
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. So my first company, I had been at Microsoft for a number of years. And it was right in the stock market crash of 2000. And so didn't kind of got out of that. I'd left Microsoft and I wanted to start a company, but it was a terrible environment for raising money. So I had, a little bit on hand and decided, look, I'm just going to get going with what I have at hand. I had a business partner at the time, and we decided to just bootstrap it from day one, and had some, you have to figure out how much runway you have, how much you want to pay yourselves. And it was just the two of us at the start. And so, it's in contrast, over the years, I had that company for about, 10, 11 years, went through the financial crisis of 2008, kind of came back around, and it started to get a bit easier to raise money and things loosened up. And I ended up selling it after, about 11, 12 years. But after I got the itch again, I started working for some people as an executive, had the itch again. And a lot is just who you know and who you meet. So networking was hugely important. I just didn't have the network really when I first started out. I was an engineer, software engineer, and I knew engineers. I didn't know venture capitalists. I didn't know people, investors at the time. you kind of, I mean, I think anybody starting out, if, I mean, as much as coming up with the idea, I think it's generating the network, generating people that are interested in what you're doing. And I was lucky enough to meet the right people and have enough of a kind of ecosystem around me that when I had an idea, I guess it was almost exactly a year ago, I started looking for money for a seed round for, and I'd actually started writing code several years before that. So I had some IP that I had already built, and met the right people, got a lead investor, was able to put together a full seed round, and I mean, yeah, became venture backed. And so it was, I mean, completely different than bootstrapping.
So now you do that, and so you got kind of have the both sides of the coin, bootstrapping on some sense and raising money on the other. Now, if you're to go out and let's say you're to start a new business today, how would you go about making the determination? Hey, on this business, I should bootstrap. This one, I should get investor dollars. Maybe, how much do I raise, or kind of how would you even go about tackling that? Because I think every business is a bit different.
Yeah.
If you're going out and building a huge technology company that you're going to have to do a whole bunch of research and development, R&D, you're going to have to hire on a team, and it's going to take 2 or 3 years to get a product out in the market. Makes it really hard to bootstrap. On the other hand, if you're going to go or start to sell pencils door to door, you could probably bootstrap that. So how do you kind of make that weighing or that determination?
Yeah, I mean, I come from a software engineering background, so I think I could already build a lot of it myself. And I think if you come from that side, it's a bit easier where there's nights and weekends. And so essentially, I kind of did bootstrap the second company for several years, where nights and weekends I would work and write code and kind of build out the concept. I even contracted out with some friends to help with the UI and some of the design. And so I think if you're going to raise money, I mean, at least in my experience now, it seems like you have to have something to show for it. Just having purely an idea is really hard, unless you have the next Uber or the next Airbnb, and it's a brand new thing that you're bringing to the market. If it's something different, and especially, I mean, I'll just stay in the software realm, the more you can show for it, the better. Even if it's a mock-up, even if it's a prototype, I would try and do as much as you can. Just spend the time, nights and weekends, get it gelled. There's a lot of great resources out there for doing customer discovery and just asking questions of people on LinkedIn and things like that to know if you're heading in the right trajectory. I think once you have something to show and can kind of, I mean, even if it's early, just something to find people on LinkedIn and say, hey, I mean, what do you think about this? That doesn't cost money. I mean, you can do a lot without any funding just during the customer discovery phase. So I think that would be my big suggestion, is do as much of that for free, or essentially on your own dollar. And then once you have something to show for it, then it's the right time to trigger, okay, let me go get some seed money, or even some pre-seed money. I mean, 300, 400, 500 grand, I mean, is probably a couple years salary for most people. So that actually, the ability to leave your day job, that's usually the trigger point for people. I actually contracted for other companies for a while just to pay the bills, and then was working on my own stuff in parallel. So I would spend the mornings writing code for people, and then at nights working on my own stuff. And I think that actually works great.
No, and I think that, that definitely makes sense. I think the hard thing is that people, well, 2 things are kind of hard. One is people oftentimes get an itch to, hey, I want to get this going as quick as I can, and I don't want to be patient. And even though a lot of times it would be better to be patient, because you're not going to have to give up as much equity, you're going to get a better valuation, you're going to be, have better value in the business. You're saying, but I want to get this now. And now sometimes that might be the best way, is if it's a very competitive environment, you're saying we have a very narrow window and you're going to have to take a bit of a haircut in order to get the investor dollars in, but it's going to make up for it because you're the first, have a first mover advantage. So so be it. And that does happen. But I think a lot of times patience can be a better ally if it's saying, hey, yes, if I could, maybe if I were to go raise some money, I might have to give up half of my company or more, and I can get it going 6 months quicker. On the other hand, I can wait or do it, X, Y, and Z, hit these milestones, be able to have a much greater valuation. And then when I do hit or go out for that, I'm giving up 20% of the company at a better valuation, and I'm able to keep it and probably get more money. So I think there is that balance. Sometimes you're saying, hey, I just want to keep it all to myself, and I'd rather take the time and self-fund it, and I'll figure out a way to get it done. So I think there's always that option. So One of the things you did hit on, switching gears just slightly, that I think is definitely interesting to hit on as well, was the kind of the customer discovery or getting the insight both on who is your potential customer when you're getting a business up and going, but also kind of now once your business is up and going, capturing customer data. One of the data is kind of always, I think, the hot buzzword, which everybody's wanting to sell data. Everybody's kind of the joke is everybody's a SaaS company or everybody's a data company, because that's where you use those keywords and it seems like you get a better valuation. But one of the hard things is, sure, you gather a lot of data. If you can find somebody that wants to buy it, maybe that's a great setup. But most of the time, data is only as good as you can get insights from, or that is actionable. In other words, you can get a whole bunch of client and customer data, and yet you have no idea what to do with it, or you don't, you have email open rates. Great. Now, what are they opening? Are they engaging? Are they not engaging? What does that mean? Oh, great. We have, this client, our clients are located in these locations or these demographics. Again, without that information, and what does it mean, doesn't provide a lot of insight, doesn't provide a lot of value. So how do you go about applying, insights to data, or even figuring out which data you should get, and then how to figure out what that data means to you?
It's a great question, and I think it's not easy. And I think, if you're coming into this as an engineer or from some other, other side of things, learning that it's essentially sales. How do you learn sales? How do you learn marketing? There's so much reading you can do and just research that doesn't cost money. It's you don't need funding just to start to figure out how to ask questions properly and things like that. And I think that product positioning part and the data, for me, it's, you want to get signal. And you want to figure out, okay, what are people reacting to? You start to craft the message is so important. You start to hone in. Like, I had an idea of a company to help with cloud cost management. And so I came up with a little short email, and I messaged like 100 people on LinkedIn, and started to be like, okay, who thought I was crazy? Who thought this actually sounded good? And you start to hone that message of just, how do you describe yourself? How do you ask questions about this concept? And anybody can do that. And it's really just about, learning, really. And it's not even about writing code. It's not about, building a team yet. But I think once you start to get those signal, then you could start diving deeper. And then you could start being like, okay, if we did X, Y, and Z, would you pay $1 for it? And for me, that's the trigger point. We may build something cool. And as an engineer, it's like, it's more, sometimes you get caught up in, hey, this is cool, but I don't know if I could sell it. And I think becoming a good salesperson, no matter what field you come from, and just thinking about, okay, what would somebody buy, even before would they spend $1, is such a thing I always try and think about. Because some people, they like the idea, but it's just not worth it to them. They're going to lose, like, maybe it's taking them out of their job, or maybe that's what they're getting paid to do already. Or maybe it's just not worth enough to them. So there's so much learning that you can do up front that I think helps hone your story.
No, I think that's definitely insightful and makes sense. So, well, on a practical sense, one of the things that I think is almost circling back to what I said is, so, getting that insight, any practical tips. So let's say I go and I set up I'm a startup or small business. I'm just getting going. I set up a CRM because I heard that that's the thing that you need to do when you have customers in order to manage them, right? So that's kind of the conventional wisdom, but there's a lot of truth to it. And now I have a CRM, and it gives me my general client information. Maybe it's their name, their address, their demographic, maybe how much they spent, where they're located. If I'm lucky, it tells me where they came from. If they came from ads or they came from Facebook. And that's about it, on a very basic level. You can certainly get more aggressive. But if that's kind of the initial information I get, is that enough to actually garner insights from, or what insights you should garner? Or how do I even start as a startup or small business to say, I've got to get somewhere. I've got to start somewhere. I don't know what that is. I've got some data. Should I start with that?
Yeah, the way I've been looking at it lately, and this is something we're doing actively now, is we've been focused on the who. And a lot of the thing it's some part is the market segment of who you're getting signal from, but also, like, what are their titles and what are their levels, and could they even buy? And that is, I've actually been looking at like the titles of the people we've been finding, like through a CRM and through, I mean, people we've been doing train exploration, but it's, are they VPs, are they directors, or are they kind of line of business users? Because how you sell to them is going to be completely different. And some people are looking at it from a strategic standpoint. Some people are looking at it from a tactical, like, can you solve my problem so I can get 2 more hours out of my day? And I think that is one of the pieces of data that I've been really focused on is, I mean, how you sell matters a lot of who you're talking to. And so we've been really focused on trying to segment people, because I mean, we've actually had some signal from people that are what I call like line of business users. It's, they have the problem, they understand our solution, but also selling into them, they may not have budget. I mean, they may not control the budget. So you have to figure out, okay, well, who's their manager? What's the team they're on? Where's the budget come from? And you kind of have to work your way up the chain to really understand who are these people, and then start to focus on, okay, well, what are those people's titles? And those are the kind of people you need to talk to. So there's a lot of.
And how do you do that? You kind of, how do you work? I'm trying to think in a practical sense. Now, I've done it enough. I probably have a bit more experience. I'm probably not the typical person that's getting started out, but if I were to try and take myself back and back in time, so to speak, how do you do that? In other words, I agree with you, we need to get that information, but how do you understand that, or how do you do that? And in other words, it doesn't seem, there isn't just a guide, well, do X, Y, maybe there is a guide, I'm just not aware, but how do you kind of make sense of that data on a practical, step-by-step level, so to speak?
Yeah, I mean, I think from a research standpoint, I mean, there's no one big org chart for the world. And so LinkedIn is great. I mean, I do a lot of customer exploration of just following companies, looking at who's working there, trying to see like what roles they are, or do you see even things like Zoom Info, or I think there's a product called Lusha that we've used. So you start to understand okay, for say an oil and gas company, how are they structured? What kind of teams do they have? Oh, they have an innovation team. What are the titles of the people in an innovation team? So you really have to learn how the companies are built, and then who are the people that are working there, and then look for those patterns. And so we essentially do that, and then start to sort essentially on, okay, data engineering manager, CIO, chief data officer, and then basically start to say, oh, look, I have a cohort of people now. I have 10 chief data officers that all look like they're similar in context. We can go talk to them. So you try and find these clusters of people that look like common, like similar customers, and then you can refine the story for that cluster. And I mean, a lot of it is just boots on the ground, searching LinkedIn, creating spreadsheets. And you don't even have to have a fancy CRM for this. But it really just comes down to looking for patterns, and then crafting emails. I mean, crafting outbound discussions. I mean, it's kind of, I mean, I'm not a salesman, but it's just kind of, I've learned it through osmosis of just kind of how to target these cohorts of people.
No, I think that makes sense. And I think that the difficulty is there isn't an easy way to just go and mine the data. In other words, it does take some, more than anything, time on task. Let's dive into what is the data telling us. And sometimes it's, the other thing I think you have to make sure is you have a large enough data set to actually garner any sort of insights. In other words, if you have customer data from five customers, and you're just barely getting started out, you're probably going to be a bit premature. Unless there's only 10 customers for your product in the whole world, then maybe you've got it, 50% is pretty good. But for most of the time, you're going to say, you have to have a reasonable data set to say, hey, we've got 3 orders that are in Texas or California, but if you only have 5 orders, it does not mean that all your customers are located there. But you can, so you want to make sure you have a good enough data set. And then to your point, getting those, or whether it's LinkedIn, going on Facebook, doing some research, seeing who those are, and garnering that data, I think can give you a much better direction.
Go
ahead.
I was going to say, I mean, the number that I've usually heard is have between 50 and 100 discussions, because you need to have that statistical significance to start triangulating or clustering that data. And if you can get 50 plus, I mean, just chats with people. I mean, it doesn't even have to be a very salesy, but just understanding what are their likes, what are their dislikes, then you can start to cluster things together. And that's what because then you can start segmenting, be like, okay, these are in manufacturing, these are in I don't know, media entertainment and stuff like that. But if you have like 3 or 5, you're just, I mean, it could be all across the board. It's really hard to find patterns if you're like sub 10 discussions you've had with potential customers.
No, I agree. And yet, sometimes it's exciting to see those initial customers, and it's always kind of fun to get those orders. And usually the first order is always exciting to say, hey, somebody's willing to pay me for this. But you do have to, I think, apply just a bit of patience to say, while it's exciting, you also have to give it a bit of time. Now, one of the other things that I think we chatted a bit before, as far as now we talk a bit about data, is there's a lot of different data in the sense you can get email data, open rates, you can get videos, do they engage or watch the videos? How long do they watch the videos? You can get content engagement. You have a blog, are people reading the blog? How far they're reading the blog? You can get website website visits, as far as, how many people are visiting the website, how far do they scroll down? You can do heat maps, which are telling people, where people are clicking. In other words, there's a lot of different areas that you can get data. And so is there any right or wrong or ways that, or if you're starting out, areas that you should focus on? These are the things, and I'm sure it's a bit of, it depends on your business, but kind of any general or guidance or advice as to where you might want to consider looking at as far as the data, or to gather, or first of all, get the data from the different sources, and then to look at those data if you already have it.
Yeah, and I think there's 2 sides to it. I mean, we kind of look at it, there's the marketing website and you have your product. I mean, if it's a web-based, like typical SaaS kind of product today, the marketing website, we're really focused on just capturing emails. I mean, just finding people that are interested. It's really about just that's developing that community, because once you know their email, you can pretty much learn about anybody. I mean, if it's a business email or a name that you get, so you can start to gather data purely in, okay, they work for this company, they're this title. There are tools out there that just from an email, typically you can gather that kind of social context. And then we track, I mean, we've used tools like HubSpot, or there's a zillion tools out there for this, but you can track their progression of, okay, they put in their email, they clicked on a try it now link, they browse this many pages of your website. I mean, there's a million tools out there for that. You can spend anywhere from $50 a month to $5,000 a month. I mean, that's a really, I mean, you kind of just have to, I typically like to start small, make sure that, I mean, you're at least getting value from it, but you can always replace these things later. And then there's the other side of it of when if they get into your app, we've used tools like Hotjar, which are the heat mapping. There's I can't remember the other one. There's another one where it can like record videos of what they're doing on the website, kind of anonymized videos. We're actually starting to work with Segment now, where you can essentially do event tracking. Like they clicked on this link, they went through this part of your website, like they opened this panel. That's a ton of great data, but they have to kind of already be at least a trial customer using your application at some point. It gets very overwhelming. I mean, if you wanted to go full bore, I mean, you could spend $10,000 a month connecting all these pieces up. So I think you really have to be pragmatic about what data you really want. Initially, most people just start off with data collection. Like, hey, I'm going to put up a website with ideas that I have, kind of a virtual product, and see if you get emails. I mean, that's a great place to start. If you can even mock up a video of what your app would do or something like that, I think we've got a lot of good feedback from just do a Loom video recording with a voiceover or things like that. It's a great, easy way to describe what you're doing, walk it through, and people seem to react really well with stuff like that. So it's a whole spectrum, like you said.
Awesome. Well, I agree that there is a whole spectrum, and I think that I think that probably the best takeaway is understand your business, or at least see what is your business strategy. And in other words, are you going to be, hey, the way that we're going to sell is we're going to email everybody and have a big newsletter. The way we're going to sell is be active on socials. The way we're going to sell is have an engaging website that we're going to drive with SEO or paid advertising, because a lot of that, depending on, the avenues you're going to go, you're going to gather and look at different data. So I think that garnering that insight is definitely beneficial.
And one thing I'll just throw in there, sorry to interrupt, is event marketing is really interesting. Like going to conferences, meeting people where they are. It's been hard during COVID, but we've actually seen a lot of traction. Just finding some conferences with people that you think you could potentially sell to, and see if you can just ask them questions and just talk to people. we've gotten a ton of great feedback that wasn't even online, and it was just you learn from people. And so we're actually planning more of that next year, of just trying to go to some really interesting conferences just to refine the story, refine the pitch, and you can kind of do it in real time because the people are there to learn about new products and things like that.
No, I think that's a great piece of advice as well. Well, we could, I'm sure, talk about data and bootstrapping and money and raising and focusing the business and a whole lot of other things, and it'd be a great conversation. But you know, we do have to make it so that it's not a full day podcast, but rather a digestible podcast. So with that, as we start to wrap up, I always have one question at the end of each podcast, which is, you know, we've covered several different areas, everything from what data to collect to how to collect it to how to analyze it, how to bootstrap or raise money, what to consider, and a lot of different things that are great areas for people that they should and probably should and need to get going on. But on the other hand, you only have so many hours in the day and only so many things that you can get going on at any given time with the business. And so if people were to say, okay, walk away from this and they can only get started on one thing that would get them going, what would that one thing be?
I think customer discovery by far. There's processes to ask the questions, have conversations with potential customers. I mean, I'd say that if folks spend more time just doing that process of learning their market, going through the iterations of having the conversations even before putting a website up, even before writing a line of code, there's some great resources out there that, I don't know, just like worksheets and canvases to fill out and all this kind of stuff. That's where I suggest to start. I think spend the time there, make it gel, and then move on to the really heavy lifting.
I think that's a great takeaway and great advice. So now as we wrap up, if people want to reach out to you, they want to be a customer, they want to be a client, they want to be an investor, they want to be an employee, they want to be your next best friend, any or all of the above, what's the best way to reach out to you, contact you, find out more?
Yeah, LinkedIn, Kirk Marple on LinkedIn. We also have Twitter. I'm Kirk Marple on Twitter, and we have a company Twitter that's Unstruck for the company. But any of those are great.
All right. Well, I definitely encourage people to reach out to connect and definitely utilize the expertise. Well, thank you again for coming on the podcast. It's been fun. It's been a pleasure. Now, for all of you that are listeners, if you can make sure to click subscribe, make sure to click share, make sure to click review, any or all of the above, because we want to make sure that everybody, all those startups and small businesses are looking to grow and improve their business, are getting access to this great expertise. So make sure to definitely share and leave us a review. Also, if you ever need help with your business, with the patent or trademark or anything else, feel free to go to strategymeeting.com. We're always here to help and always want to make sure to get you taken care of. Thank you again, Kirk, and wish the next leg of your journey even better than the last.
Thank you.